be about genetic engineering, and we are going to start with the cons. Please give them a warm welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Olivia. This is Mariah, Shayla, and Kyler, and our presentation is on the cons of genetic engineering.
Since its discovery in 1972, genetic engineering has done more harm than good. Genetic engineering is any alteration to an organism's gene in an unnatural setting. Despite efforts to put limits on companies using genetic engineering, genetically modified organisms dominate industry.
Genetic engineering has led to negative effects on the environment, risks of unintended outcomes, reduced efficiency of plants, and an overall negative social outcome.
Good afternoon. I'm Demond Morris.
I'm Elizabeth Goliath. I'm Trinity Miller, and I'm Abby Clemens.
We're here to present on the topic of the pros of genetic engineering. Well, genetic engineering is the alteration or manipulation of the genetic process by direct interventions such as a human or scientist. And it dates back to the beginning in 1972 and 1973 by the scientist Paul Berg. It was later improved on by Stanley Cohen and Herbert Boyer. But if you go back way far to our ancestors, during the time when they were first starting to domesticate animals and plants, they were actually intervening in the genetic process, genetic modifications of the plants and animals that we were consuming. Because when they were choosing the biggest trees that give out the biggest berries, they were choosing those ones to be their supplier of their berries, and they wanted to domesticate those ones. When they were choosing the biggest animals to domesticate, they were using the biggest animals and using them to mate each other and producing the biggest offspring, leading to more food for them. Which is why we are here today to support the topic of genetic engineering for scientists. Our first pro.
Genetic engineering has multiple negative effects on the environment. Adaptations are crucial for organisms to survive in changing environments. Adaptations give organisms advantages and disadvantages that are weeded out by natural selection. When genetically modified organisms are released and mate with natural organisms, their offspring have different adaptations and therefore different advantages and disadvantages that eventually uniform and dominate or eliminate the species. This lessens biodiversity. With fewer individual differences, it is harder for a species to evolve and adapt to changing environments. Another negative effect is, as organisms' genes are tampered with to produce longer lasting, more abundant, faster growing, and bigger organisms, their nutritional value decreases.
Well, our first pro here today is the ability to eradicate genetic birth defects and genetically or hereditary born illnesses. Roughly every year in the United States, 120,000 to 150,000 babies are born with birth defects and genetic born illnesses. As you see on this chart, chromosomal defects in the red, they have been increasing since 1980, just like Down syndrome and trisomy 18. All of these affect the ability for the child to grow at their mental and physical capacity as you would want them to. But with the power of genetic engineering and modifications, scientists and doctors will have the ability to go into people with their genes and change them and correct them in case there's a mutation that happens naturally, which it's not supposed to be there, like a deletion of a chromosome or the adding of a chromosome, like Down syndrome, which adds the 21st chromosome, and can be very detrimental to the mental capacity and the growing of the child. Well, in 1990, a 4-year-old child was worked on by the National Institute of Health, and he was successfully treated for severe combined immunodeficiency. That means his T and B cells are lower than the natural person, and it takes hard for them to fight off infections. But with this treatment, their immune system now today is able to produce more T and B cells, which allows them to fight off the viruses and the diseases that your body can in a normal state of this disease.
Another detrimental effect of genetic engineering is the increase increased risk of unintended outcomes. Now, genetic engineering is very difficult to perform correctly in the sense that no matter how you do it, there's always a chance that things will not perform as you intended to. However, even if they do have an outcome that was expected and planned, it can still cause other effects to the world that you might not have expected. An example of this would be in a study that was recently conducted on cultivated strawberries and wild strawberries. Wild strawberries would be ones you'll find in your backyard, while cultivated ones being genetically engineered specifically for the study, but overall, they're generally the kind that you find in the grocery store. Now, as I said, the cultivated strawberries in the study were genetically engineered. When the researchers went to the wild strawberries, they tested them to see if the gene that had been genetically engineered from the cultivated strawberries could be found present in the wild strawberries, especially being that they were close relatives of each other. It was found that within 50% of the wild strawberries, within 50 meters of the cultivated strawberry field, they contained the gene. Now, this might not seem like such a big deal. They're just wild strawberries. However, this can be applied to many other areas as well with plants. One example of this would be when using herbicides. Some crops can be genetically modified or affecting them. This will mean that the herbicide will only hurt the weeds that are around them in order to kill them and give the crops more space to grow. However, should the gene go from cultivated plants into the weeds, then this will mean that the weeds are able to resist the herbicide and killed by the toxin.
Alright, so I'll be discussing and it's very scary how much money that this can waste as you don't realize you're throwing out foods that are expired. How quickly this can add up. You may be curious as to why there's a tomato, a very nice carrot. However, scientists in New Delhi conducted an experiment in this show that they can expand the lifetime of tomato, reporting very impressive as this research is very new for them to be able to triple the lifespan of food. Very eye-opening on the fact potential that genetic engineering has. So in conclusion, genetic engineering can expand the lifetime of food, among other things, and very
West in Europe, where genetic engineering is illegal, in America, genetic engineering is legal, and between their cornmeal and when it is on the graph going to the left. And on average, though, you can find that much it hurt agriculture and not give it a chance to grow in other areas. And the international assessment of agricultural science and development is also that
estimated 70% of U.S. consumers don't want genetically modified organisms in their food because they have been informed about the negative impacts it can have on their health and body. This ties in with the controversial topic about GMO food labels. As of today, the Federal Food and Drug Administration has not made it mandatory for businesses to use the GMO food label. And although some businesses do use them, a majority of U.S. companies do not use the labels. This makes people even more curious as to if the GMOs are really safe as people put them out.
Genetic engineering also helps reduce genetic. This happens by rewriting or writing over steps. One of the genetic commands help reduce the fibrosis. Originally, people with cystic fibrosis lived about 40 and 37. But after being switched to gene therapy or genetic engineering, their life expectancy has increased. More than 30,000 people in the U.S., more than 70,000 people have cystic fibrosis. And that number increased to 5,000 every year. 10% of people are that have cystic fibrosis are diagnosed with 5-HT. FGL has successfully genetically modified the common mutation that cystic fibrosis is curable. But now that with the help of genetic engineering, it can now be reduced.
In conclusion, genetic engineering is harmful due to detrimental effects in the environment, the risk of unintended outcomes, the reduced farming efficiency, and the negative social aspects.
We recommend to the World Health Organization they need to put tougher laws on genetic.
In conclusion, tying this into our scenario, we believe that the World Health Organization should lessen its restrictions on the practice of genetic engineering due to its benefits.
The ability to eradicate genetic birth defects and genetic organisms.
The ability to stand a food that's reducing the amount of the production of greater crop yield at a lower price.
The ability to reduce genetic like scientists have the possibility to solve worldwide problems using this technology.
This said that cystic fibrosis, men use 40 and women use 37. But with genetic engineering, increases. Do you know what age they live to now?
It is a new study that has been ongoing. There's not a lot of
It's called genetic engineering because it's still in an early stage and we cannot, at the time, scientists are still working on trying to be able to change and correct these genes before the baby is born. There are many diseases that are happening without genetic engineering that we're trying to reverse and correct.
Okay, when did you say that the guy in, I can't remember exactly what
What year that was? All I remember is that it was in the last decade. It was very recent.
Okay, so do you know what they put in the tomatoes?
They use the resource power. They said that they extract DNA from plants that are or famous for lasting longer than other plants. Taking that DNA and extracting it and using the other. I don't know if that's what they did. That does not harm you. I can only assume that it's not going to harm you.
Oh yeah, it was just for the cons. You mentioned that
genetic engineering threatens specific animal species in your research? You come across which ones?
Not specifically, but I felt like it was saying human dominated here.
Did you ever come across how cost effective this is? How much it costs to have, say, a whole field of genetically modified organisms compared to just naturally growing? Is it cost effective? How expensive is stuff?
It's still an early stage. Scientists are still trying to find a cheaper alternative. Because right now, research is costing a lot. So they don't exactly know a rough price of whether or not the material can, or what the process has to be used on humans, and what the price will be. But I know on average, roughly, for my graph, when I was showing money for like their medicine and their hospital bills.
Last question is for has arguments. They said that genetic engineering used to prevent diseases and birth defects and health issues. So what health issues? You guys are saying that it's causing health issues. So they're being caused by genetic engineering.
Well, some health issues, but there is the since the plants are losing nutritional value, that can have an effect on how like filling it is to your body, so it can lead to disorders relating to food.
Roughly 75% of all U.S. products, food products, are genetically modified. So not most likely you had something that's genetically modified. Probably genetically possible.